or two while we get everybody on here in the office. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Okay, so let's get started. I want to remind everybody that we will post a recording of this webinar on the High Impact Grant Making page today, by the end of business today. So let's go to the next slide, Sarah. All right, I do want to make sure we introduce the staff. Natalie Garcia, our other program officer, is also on the call, as is Sarah Sobral, our foundation support specialist. I always like to remind everybody that we are, this is the staff that will be managing all your questions and assisting you through any of the grant making program cycles. Right now we're going to launch our first poll. So Sarah, do you want to start us off with the first question? All right. Did you or someone else from your organization attend a high impact information session in Visalia, Fresno, or via webinar? Please respond. Okay. All right, we got about 80% has voted. Yes. Let's go on to the next one. Yeah, share the results before we get to our next one. So 100% of you, yes. All right, great. Well, I don't think we need to do, let's see, what's the next question? It may not be applicable. Oh, okay, yes. Did you or someone else from your organization participate in a 30-minute conference call or phone call with an FRF program officer? So, okay, here we go. So 71 yes, did a conference call, 29% no. Okay. So let's go on to today's agenda. So number one, we're going to review OPF and application deadlines and some key things that we want to highlight. Two, we want to share what we learned as a result of the conference calls that we had with most of you. Three, we want to go over the application narrative questions. Those were not available when we were conducting our information sessions. And then lastly, we want to take your questions. So let's go to the next slide. All right, the deadline for the organization profile form is November 2nd at 5 p.m. Be certain to change your status on your OPF to submit to FRF if you want the program staff to review it. We have on the website, on the grant making page, the how to apply piece of any of our grant making grant cycles, but we have the October 10th webinar that includes that. So please review that webinar. Toward the end of it, we go over how to apply. It's essentially the bidders meeting. We want you to have the most positive experience on Olga, and we've provided this information so you can navigate it as easy as possible. Note, for those of you who have applied to the foundation before, you'll have notes in your organization profile form. And make certain that if those notes say okay to apply, it is dated for 2012. If it is not dated for 2012, and you will know that the program officers, the program staff will initial it and date it after the comment or note. And if there's not a 2012 date, we will not accept it. So please note the date that is included in your note at the end of your note. We require that organization profile forms, the OPF, we require that they are updated once a calendar year. So it is not a year from the time that you updated it. So if you have applied, the last time you applied was last year for the environment, it is not good for a year from that time. That date has to have a 2012 date at the end of it. Thirdly, we want to make sure that you all know that we process the OPFs in order of submission. You do not have to wait to start on your applications. It gets to my fourth point. You will receive, there are 3 layers of confirmations for submissions. When you've submitted it, there will be 2 automated responses to confirm that it was submitted. The third one will come in the form of an email from the program staff. You do not have to wait for that third one to move on to work on your application. So 2 automated responses will be sent if your submission has been submitted successfully. The third one will come from the program staff once we have actually reviewed it. All right, let's go to the next slide. The application deadline is Friday, November 9th at 5 p.m. Again, be certain to change your status to submit to FRF. There are 2 documents that will be attached to the application. One is the budget, one is the narrative questions. This is standard for all of our applications. The budget, remember, has 2 tabs. All these grants are over $10,000, so you will be providing us general budget information on the first tab, and the second tab is the financial history of the organization. The second attachment is the narrative question document. And we'll go over those questions in detail later on in this presentation, but those are the 2 attachments for your application. Third, again, confirmation of submission. You will receive 2 automated responses, and the third final confirmation will come from the program staff once we have reviewed it. And these are also reviewed in order of submission. Lastly, site visits for the most compelling proposals are scheduled for December 5th and 6th. So we wanted to make sure everybody knew that the committee meets in November to review these applications, and the date scheduled for those that are selected to go to the next round for the site visits is December 5th and 6th. All right, let's go to the next tab. We wanted to review again before we go into the questions is what high impact will not fund. It will not fund capital projects, building a playground, building a preschool in and of itself. That's its sole objective. It will not fund non-integrated programs, so standalone reading programs or programs just within the organization that's not integrated with your partners in the community. And it won't fund materials only, curriculum, buying books for children. The work must be tied to regional or community efforts to improve outcomes for children and families. All right, let's go over the 4 grant opportunities. Accelerator grants are 2-year grants. They range from $100,000 to $150,000. Alignment grants are also 2-year grants. They range from $100,000 to $150,000 also. Connector grants are 1-year grants. They range from $25,000 to $75,000. Advocacy grants could be 1- or 2-year grants, and they also range from $25,000 to $75,000. This is all on the website in greater detail. Let's go on to the next slide and share a little bit about what we learned. So these calls that we did last year were not, last week, were not mandatory, but they were strongly encouraged. For those of you who did not have a conference call, we encourage you to please email us. And if we can schedule something, we will. But we certainly want to make certain that what you are considering to submit in a grant application aligns with the intent of the committee and aligns with the intent of the grant. So first of all, there was an overwhelming sense of excitement. There were very few questions on the what, the 0 to 8 focus. We found ourselves providing a lot of clarification about the how, the approach, the collective impact. And as a result, we have created a section on our website. It has additional collective impact info. So as I mentioned, first, the calls were invigorating. They were very positive, and this overwhelming sense of excitement to support this type of work in this area. It was apparent to us that the majority of you were very clear on the focus of 0 to 8 and how we support families and students, so we're seeing success by the 3rd grade. And that was very gratifying. Third, where we found ourselves spending our time was explaining the collaboration, the deep, I guess, maybe a little more depth on the types of collaboration, and shared agenda, shared measurements and data. Really on the key elements on collective impact. So as I mentioned, everybody was good on the what, the 0 to 8 focus. The how was, I think, for both of Natalie and me, was providing a lot of examples as to what integration meant, what a seamless web support for families meant. And so the 5 key elements that were in the 2 videos that we shared in the presentation, I thought would be worth kind of recapping here. So this common agenda, this shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities. This means that your programs are integrated with your partners to create that seamless web of support, and how your partners build upon your programs, and vice versa, how you're building on your partners' programs. And then 4, the continuous communication, not just quarterly meetings or monthly meetings, but this real communication on how you're moving forward and accomplishing those shared, that shared agenda and shared goals. And then fifthly, the 5th key element is this backbone organization or entity. This is the group or the entity that mobilizes and coordinates and facilitates this whole effort. So to provide additional clarity on this approach, we've added some more information on our website on collective impact. So we're going to go there. Sarah's going to take us there. And I think I also wanted to mention that there is a podcast that I included in this section. And I encourage everybody to listen to. It's about 57 minutes long, and it's on This American Life. I thought it was relevant and pertinent to this work and to this approach. So Sarah, do you want to transition us there?
Yes, okay. So I always like to start everybody out from our home page so you know exactly where you're going. If you always go up to our grant making tab, this is where most of what you need is at. You'll see all of our competitive grant cycles across this way. Our high impact automatically comes up right now. If you scroll, all the way down past the guidelines, you'll find this little section, a copy of our PowerPoint from the information session, the handout that was emailed to you right before this webinar, and the recording of our first webinar. This is where you will also find the recording of our current webinar. Should be posted by the end of the day today. Right here is what we're looking for. This is our little link to the research documents that our committee has looked at. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find that videos and podcast section that Sandra just referenced.
All right. That's where the information is located. Please take the time to review those. Okay, it will be important in the accelerator and alignment grants to demonstrate how you have incorporated those 5 key elements that we just went over. Note that the connector grants will not be funding programs. It's going to be funding and supporting how those key elements are put in place. And the advocacy grants didn't generate a lot of questions. That was pretty straightforward. So those are the things that we want to bring to your attention. And any time to kind of orient yourself or refresh, the conversation around this approach, please refer to those videos. So let's go to the next slide so we can go over the narrative questions. And I want to, before we go there, I want to highlight the selection criteria. This is on the website. We have placed these at the top of the narrative question template just to remind you that your answers should include these elements. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so these, let's go, are we on to the next slide? Yeah, here we go. These 4 questions apply to every single application. Doesn't matter if you're applying to accelerator, alignment, connector, or advocacy. These 4 questions are applicable to all of those. And the selection criteria that was in the previous slide, including those, thinking about where those fit into your answers is going to be important. Let's go to the narrative questions for accelerator grants only. I'm not going to restate each of these questions, but these are the additional questions to the 4 that we just showed you. These are just for acceleration grants. So that means if you are applying to an accelerator grant, you will answer the 4 that we just went over, and these 2. You could delete the rest of the questions. This is the only thing we want on that narrative attachment. Let's go to the next one, alignment grants. So you will answer the 4 questions that we just went over that are applicable to all of the funding scenarios, and this question for alignment grants. Everything else you can delete. And these are the only questions that should be on that template. Let's go to the next one. This is the same for connector grants. You've got the 4 that apply to all, and these additional questions. I want to restate that there is really no information here that we want on the type of programs this would be funding. This is about how you're going to put those key elements, those 5 key elements, in place with your partners. Let's go to the last one, advocacy grants. Very straightforward, the 4 that were applicable on the narrative, and then these. All right, let's go to the, so I want to remind everyone that has attended an information session in person or via webinar. If you participated in a conference call, and those of you on this call, this webinar, you will remain on the Foundation's radar, whether you are funded or not. The Foundation is interested in supporting a learning community as we move forward. So I do want to take a moment now to start answering any questions. So we'll give you all a little time. Anybody?
You can go ahead and raise your hand, or you can type in a question. All right, Susan Gillison, I am going to unmute your line. Susan, go ahead and ask your question. All right, Susan, we'll come back to you. If you still have a question, go ahead and type it in. Okay, we do have a couple of questions here. Is there a page limit for the narrative?
No page limit, no word limit on the narratives. So when you go to the application, there are, I believe, 5 questions on the template of the application that all have a character limit. So there are limits on that, on the template application. In the attachment, there are no word limits or no page limits. But the compelling ones will be concise and well articulated. So, but there are no word limits.
Okay, we have another question. What are the requirements for compliance?
The requirements for compliance to apply in general, or compliance for the grant for the funding scenarios? I think we went over for the grant funding. So I would go over the webinar that is posted from the October 10th to go over those priorities and how to be compliant. And I would also refer to the videos that we've provided to you to be compliant. So in that webinar, that's posted for October 10th, we went over each of the funding scenarios and the types of things that it would fund.
Okay, another question. For the alignment grant, can you give a scenario describing how strong of a collaboration already needs to be in place? This person's trying to discern between applying for that one versus a connector grant.
Right. So the elements that should be demonstrated in the alignment is already a shared agenda and shared data and shared measurements. The things that are missing maybe are the sectors. You're missing some sectors. You're missing economic development, or maybe you're missing the sheriff and the police, in that community, in that work that you're doing. But there's already, you can demonstrate the deep type of partnerships that exist and how everybody is on the same page on the goal. Everybody is in alignment with the agenda. Everybody shares data, informs, and your programs currently inform the partners that you have in place. There should be some demonstration of those 5 key elements. If one of those elements is missing, like the data sharing, then it is not the integrated. It's going to be hard for you to describe if you're not measuring the same things, if you're not seeing how you're moving toward your goal, if that element is not in place. So there should be some. You should be on that journey already. All 5 of those elements should be demonstrated. The alignment will just allow you to kind of solidify it, get those additional partners to the table, do some filling of gaps. It will allow you to do programming, but you are going to have to demonstrate those 5 elements that are in place. They may not be 10s yet, but they are certainly in place. Does that help? I hope it does. All right, I want to stay on the phone and answer any questions. We've got something coming in.
Once the grant is funded, what is required to verify compliance? What paperwork is required?
I think to verify what you have submitted, what the applying organization has submitted, that verification will be done at the site visit. So once you're funded, there will be, if it's a multi-year grant, there will be an interim report at a year. There will be a site visit at 6 months before we get to the interim report. So a site visit at 6 months and 18 months, an interim report at 12 months, and then a final report at 24 months if this is a 2-year grant. If this is a 1-year grant, You're going to get a 6-month site visit and then a final report at a year. Okay, I'm going to see if Natalie or Sarah want to add anything. We'll take another question, and they can add anything to the call. Let's see.
We do have one more question. Can we describe Accelerator in relation to alignment?
Accelerator grants will demonstrate those 5 key elements that we went over. Everything's in place. This funding will be rocket fuel for your work. So everything, the shared agenda, the shared measurements, the constant continuous communication, the backbone organizations are identified, and all of those partners are identified. Everything is in place. And this funding is just rocket fuel for you to accelerate your work. There are no gaps. You may want to start going to scale with what you're doing, and this funding can be used for that. But those 5 key elements that we just went over that align with collective impact, those things are clearly demonstrated and in place. So Natalie, if there are no further comments, anything additional for Sarah that you want to share with anybody that is going to be applying to us?
I don't have anything to add. In terms of compliance, I would just say that to be clear on what is required on the final report, if you have an Olga account already with us, you can go into, if you sign into Olga and then you go into My Grant Report /funded grants, it will show you the information that's going to be required, and it lines up with the information that's asked on the application in terms of the population that you serve. I'm including demographic information that you want to make yourself familiar with, so you're able to collect the information on the report that we require. And we also, the fields that we ask in the final report align with what's in the application. So, what are your intended outcomes will match up with what are your actual outcomes in the final report, the indicators that you measured, any challenges that you had in the grant, any information on sustainability of your program and how you plan on maintaining it, your final budget, and then we have 3 attachment slots for stories. So if you had any media coverage, we ask that you include that, or anything else that will demonstrate the grant impact. And I guess just a couple other observations maybe on the calls. It seemed that there was a lot of really strong programs and organizations were partnering with others, but the integration piece was still kind of needed to be developed, but there was a very strong understanding of how their program related to the 0 to 8, and just sort of developing and deepening those partnerships is kind of, I think, a common thread across a lot of the calls. So I don't think that don't feel that that you're behind the curve, because I think this is kind of a relatively new concept for us to fund, and we're really excited to see how this will further integrate and coordinate programs to help more children succeed in school by the 3rd grade.
So we have another question.
If you add any new partners to your program or collaboration, would that be an alignment or acceleration grant?
So I would say, again, the distinction for Accelerator is that all of those elements are in place, and you've got a functioning kind of mechanism and how you work with your partners, and you can add anybody you need to at that point. So it's expanding, it's scale, it's replication, it's just resources to accelerate, expand your work. The alignment means you've got varying degrees of those elements. They are maybe not all at a 10, but you have the elements in place and you want to fill gaps. You want to bring in those partners, have those discussions. But you clearly are already working with a group of organizations in a way that your success in your program is informing and integrated with another partner's program. So there's this seamless web of support. So the elements are there. All the elements are there. You're just going to kind of shore them up. And it still allows you to fund your programs as you're shoring up those elements, those 5 key elements. So it's going to be a matter of where you are on that journey. Are all the elements, they're all in place. They have been in place for a while. We've been functioning like this. This is how we do our work. And we're just going to expand, accelerate, replicate, add to what we're doing. But all 5 of those elements are pretty strong and have been in place for a while. Toward that end, the accelerator and alignment grants, we're going to rely on you to tell us what you will be doing, and your budget should align with that. We have no limitations on administration costs, salaries, or anything like that. We do not want to dictate that one area should not exceed a certain amount. You tell us what you need, and that's what your budget should reflect. In the alignment, in the connector grants, there should be no information in the budgets around programs. This will not be funding programs. This will be about getting those 5 elements in place. So this is not at a programmatic level. This is about how you start approaching your work that aligns with this collective impact model.
For Connector.
Oh, yes, for Connector, yes. Thank you.
Advocacy can be just one piece.
Yes.
But we do want you to be aware of kind of the broader implications that your work has on families and children.
Yes. If you have questions on advocacy, please let us know. We just didn't get very many questions on advocacy, and we didn't want to spend the time to go over any questions or funding scenarios if it was clear. So, all right. If there are no other questions, please know that you can email the program staff at any time. Again, those of you that did not schedule a 30-minute conference call with us, we really set aside last week for it, but if we can touch base with you either by email, if we can schedule a call, we certainly will, but there's a lot going on we're getting ready for. People are submitting their organization profile forms. We're getting ready to process. We are also running an environment grant cycle. So we really kind of blocked out last week to do those calls. But we will try to accommodate as many of you as possible. At the very least, email us, and you can summarize what ideas you have for funding. It was critical to the committee that we did not get an onslaught of applications that did not align with this grant cycle and the intent of it, which is why we're putting so much time on the front end to really help potential applicants understand what, understand the what and the how this grant making will unfold. So with that, thank you very much. Please feel free to email us or call us. We will be here to help you in the best way we possibly can. So thank you, and have a good day.